You're listening to episode 181, Jan's Story, a daughter with PVOD and a lung transplant. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I don't know how I get so lucky to be able to do this job and host this podcast, because meeting people like Jan and hearing her tell her story is one of the biggest privileges I've had in my life. And that's because Jan and her daughter have gone through something that is really unimaginable. And the reason she heard about this podcast was that she was on the same floor in an ICU as another mom who shared. And although their stories are so different, there's a lot of similarities there between what they went through. And it's not just because they were treated in the same hospital, but it's because they both went through transplants, which is an incredibly arduous situation. One of the most interesting parts of the story with Jan today was talking about how, because her daughter was older, her daughter needed to give consent or assent for the procedure to happen. And that's not something I knew about, or something I guess it's something that I knew about, but I never really took into consideration how old a child has to be before they can give consent to a life-saving procedure, and how that can actually end up delaying sometimes the care that's needed. So I hope that you are able to take away some nuggets of wisdom and honesty that come from Jan's story. It's not always clean and simple. Sometimes it's really messy and vulnerable. But Jan does an amazing job of describing the realities of being very new in this process of having a daughter with a onset diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension turning into PVOD and then a lung transplant. And as she says, her journey is still not over. Well, I hope you enjoy this story and this conversation that I got to have with Jan, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us today.
We live in Fort Worth, Texas. I am married. It's been 5 years. We just celebrated our 5-year wedding anniversary. His
Congratulations.
name,
Happy
thank you.
anniversary.
Thank you. And we have Jade, who is now 12, and her baby sister, Jordan, who is 2.5. I was working full time right up until the morning of Jade's diagnosis, and I just have not been back to work since.
Wow. What were you doing before her diagnosis?
My husband and I both work for the railroad, so we were dispatchers, train dispatchers.
Oh my gosh, I've never met a train dispatcher
Yeah.
before. There should be a whole
Yeah.
documentary film on what your job is, I'm sure.
They try to compare it to, like, air traffic control with planes, but just yeah, trains.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I know we're going to be talking about your older daughter today. And
Mhm.
you and I, before we just jumped on this, you were saying like we weren't a medical family before all of this, and you just got kind of thrown into it. And I think that's a really interesting perspective, because a lot of the parents we have on the podcast either know in utero or really early on, but it's something else when your child has already lived a chunk of their lives and then something changes. So why don't you walk us through kind
Yeah.
of the very beginning steps of what happened?
Honestly, I thought Jade had asthma. That's just the plain and simple of it. She would not really wanna engage in many sports or physical activities, but I thought, you know what, I was athletic growing up, she just might not be. She might be like my artsy kid. I just thought she had asthma. She wouldn't even come into like a grocery store with me. Sometimes I'd even try to bribe her, like, hey, want to come into Target, like pick out a toy or something? No. She just seemed to like slowly be withdrawing a little bit more um, from any activity. And so one day, one of her teachers called me and said, yeah, Jade told me she had asthma. Can you bring her inhaler up to school? Because she has to take some breaks just walking up the stairs. And I'm like, I talked to her doctor. Her doctor told me she did not have asthma. And so that teacher had called me and then or maybe like a week. And my best friend, who is also a family physician, and our kids were in class together, she went up to field day at Jade's school. And I had kind of been talking to her about this stuff already, but she reached out to me and was like, I think you need to take her to get some blood work. Like she keeps moving to the end of the line, so she doesn't have to participate. And even when we, walked a lap, she seemed kind of winded. So, try to set something up with your doctor. I hope I'm not overstepping. I was like, no, not at all. I appreciate it because I've kind of been seeing some of this stuff. And that was on a Friday. On the Monday was picture day, and she left school early. She started throwing up. So I called her doctor to try to get in for a sick visit, and they saw us that Wednesday. So it's just a couple days between when she had told me that. And our doctor sent us for lab work and an x-ray at the children's hospital because she said she didn't hear any of like the wheezing that accompanies asthma. So we go down there, get an x-ray, get blood work. The doctor calls me back later that afternoon and said, the radiologist saw something. It might be nothing, but it was enough for them to suggest that we do a follow-up with cardiology. All right, no problem. I go the absolute next week. It was 1 week later. And they did an echo on her. And I just felt like while we were in the room, like something was wrong. The tech said, all right, I'm going to go ask the doctor if they need any more images. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think that's good. If it was just, a simple cut and dry, and I don't know if we'd need extra images. So we go into the room with the cardiologist, and she was like, pulmonary hypertension, her pulmonary artery is so enlarged. My nurses are already on the phone with the children's hospital to make sure they have a bed for her. So even her saying pulmonary hypertension, I wasn't scared. Not as much as I ended up becoming, but because I knew nothing about it. Nothing. Like, what? Okay. I'm thinking, right, if it's a condition, maybe some medicine, and that's that. We go from there. But then once we got down to the children's hospital, it kind of just became a whirlwind. Like I felt like my head was on a swivel. They did a right heart catheter on her. And we were sitting in the waiting room. I remember it was my mother and I. And other doctors would come out and like talk to the parents right there in the waiting room, like your child did great. And Jade's doctor walked in and was like, okay, let me take you to this room up here. So I'm like, all right, already red flags are going up, like consultation room. Like if she was fine, everyone else got meetings right there in the waiting room. And that was the first time I heard lung transplant. And I'm thinking, I have an 11-year-old child who is completely healthy. Like, you had to have gotten it wrong. Like, this can't be real life. I had recorded the conversation, because I wanted to be able to send it to my friend so she could interpret, but it was just a lot of sobbing. Like, they kept telling me her quality of life, how you like kept saying like for the remainder of her life. And I'm like, remainder of her life? Like, are you telling me it's going to be cut short? Like, what is, like, I'm still not even like fully comprehending
Right.
what's going on. And yeah, so that it kind of just started there. We ended up switching hospitals once we found out that Texas Children's was really the hospital we needed to be at. They were more equipped as far as transplants and even their pulmonology department. So we transferred our care to them, and we got in with the pulmonologist there. She's amazing. And she had told me on our first visit, which was on June 6th, that the only thing that's concerning me, Jan, is she's on these medicines for pH, but she's still meeting her oxygen requirement. Like, it hasn't seemed to have gotten better yet. It's actually kind of going in the opposite direction since going to the first children's hospital. And she said, I have a fear that it could be this PVOD, and that would be the worst case scenario. And we went back home that day. So the difference between the two hospitals, they didn't share like the same system. So the Texas children's doctor could not go in there and pull up the CT scan images or any of those test findings. That first hospital had to send them on a CD disc to her. So she called me back. Yeah, she called me back the next week. And it was after hours. So I'm already like, all right, well, at this point, it's just like one blow after the next. Like, there's no calming down or a chance to like breathe or process, or it was just one thing after another. And she said, "Are you in the room with Jade right now?" I said, "No." She said, "Okay, good. I need to tell you, I would bet my career on it that it is PVOD, and I need you to come down here." She said, "I know it's late in the evening. You guys live in Fort Worth. So first thing in the morning, I want you to head down here." She said, "If it is PVOD, we could, try to titrate some of her medicines, plan to be here for the weekend." And before we got off the phone, she said, "But Jan, I want to be honest. I'm not sure how long you'll be here." So we were admitted to Texas Children's on June 16th, and then we did not get to leave until October 10th of 2022. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I want to rewind a little bit because it's just like you went from field day to
Yeah.
lung transplant to long-term chronic hospitalization, new
Mm.
diagnosis. And I'm sure like looking back is incredibly emotional. I can see it in your
Mm.
face. How did you handle that autopilot mode that you were kind of talking about, like unable to process, going step by step? Like, what did you have a sounding board? Like, I imagine your family physician friend was
Mhm.
somebody you could like text and say this. Like, I can say just last night, I have a friend who's an ER physician. Like, everybody needs a friend who's a doctor.
Right.
And I'm like, can you look at this bump, and just somebody to process with. Did your parents step up? Who did you find your community with during those initial phases, or did you kind of keep it to yourself? How did you cope?
Oh, I do think one thing that got me through the hospitalization was how naive I was in the medical world. Because now I look back and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, those words from that echo mean heart failure." Like, I wasn't really comprehend, all of it. But yeah, so my best friend, she would be my sounding board, my sisters, my parents, but at the same time, my sisters and parents would also ask a lot of questions, and sometimes I didn't even know. "I don't know, I'll ask tomorrow," or "I'll see," it was very overwhelming for all of us because even within, our family, our whole family, we haven't had any issues like this. Like, no one has ever been sick. No one. So it was just a shock for everyone. Everyone was supportive, but it was like a nightmare for all of us. It was
Right. It's like walking the
completely.
line of like, how much information do I give without worrying them? But I also don't want to have to answer this question because I don't know it yet. It's like a whole thing with even communicating with family members.
It is. And actually, I had seen something that talked about like a circle of grief. and I had to tell my family this. Jade and I are at the center. Who's then like my sisters and my mom and dad and my husband and are in that next circle, like everyone who is on the outer rings from the center of the circle does not release any of their stress or any of their drama that they're, going on in their life that maybe I would normally want to talk about. No, I can't.
Yeah.
We can't do that right now. I can't handle it. Like it needs to go outwards. Keep that burden off of me. Kind
Mm.
of,
I
like
love
I
that
can't.
visual. It's such a powerful boundary that you have to set at the
Yeah,
beginning because you just don't have any room to process.
none. And like you're calling me about, something that bothered you with a coworker. Like, okay, I think what I'm like, I got real issues right now. Like we got some real stuff going on, some heavy
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah.
but they were great about it. And like once I expressed that, everyone
Mm.
kind of so that did help
Yeah,
a
what
little
a
bit.
good lesson.
But
It's a good lesson in like stating what your needs are, even though those
yeah,
are difficult conversations. But like when you're in the mode that you are in, it's like it's just non-negotiable. It has to be this way. And
yeah,
I'm telling you.
yeah, it's sorry, not about you right now. Like, yeah, we need some time.
Yeah. So going back to this weekend hospitalization that turned into months, how much of the information, because Jade's 11, right? So she's in the room, she's hearing a lot of things. You're both learning and processing at the same time. How did you guys handle telling her what was going on? And how did you notice her questions? And how was that whole relationship?
This is the part that seemed crazy to me is because she was 11, they would not list her unless she agreed to the transplant. Every time the transplant team would come into the room, she would sob. We couldn't talk about the word transplant. She didn't want to hear about it. It scared her, rightfully
Of
so.
course.
But
Yes.
then me as a mom, I'm like, we need to list her. Like we don't have a ton of time. Like why are we waiting on her? Like at what point are you going to let me just be like, we're doing this and list her, let's go. They said eventually we would have gotten to that point, but we were admitted, like I said, June 16th, and she was not listed till July 25th. So it took about a month and a half for her to, and she never really even said, oh, I want this. She was like, I'm scared. I don't want it, but I know I need it in order to live and to get out of the hospital. So they accepted that from her as her willingness.
Mm. What age does that kind of consent
Going to a,
consent?
I don't even know because
Mm.
she was only 11 at the time,
Yeah.
but they said that obviously she was aware enough. It was still her body, and they wanted to make sure that, post transplant, there would be compliance, so they want the transplant to be successful as well. So they
Yeah.
needed to make sure everyone was on board, the whole family.
Mm. Will you explain to us a little bit about what PVOD is and what that diagnosis entails?
So PVOD is pulmonary veno-occlusive disease. It is the most rare and the most severe form of pulmonary hypertension. And basically, it's like the veins within her lungs were like constricted, not completely obstructed, but her heart was not able to pump blood through her lungs because of, yeah, how constricted they were. With that, the right heart goes into failure because now it's working overtime to compensate for the lungs not functioning properly, doing their job. The only treatment, it's not even a cure, but the only treatment is a lung transplant.
And when you were in the hospital, we said you ended up meeting another family. Did you find any other families like yours? Or
Yes, there were two other families, and they were both like adolescent girls. with PVOD. There were other children who needed lung transplants, but for like cystic fibrosis or different diagnoses.
Mm, okay. Yeah. So talk with us a little bit more about the process of transplant for you. And, you're kind of in this boat. Like it's not like I want her to have a transplant, but she absolutely needs it to live. It's the only thing we can do. Um, what kind of mode did you find yourself in when you were in that long-term hospitalization? And were you able to take breaks or how did you handle all of it?
Oh, that is a loaded question. So, dealing with just the initial shock of transplant, uh, the whole team came in. We had to do tons of meetings with every single different like surgeon, dietitian. Like there were so many people that had to basically give the okay. Like, all right, this family will do what it takes, and that was just so overwhelming. I remember we were there just maybe 2 or 3 days at that point, and I got handed a binder, lung transplant binder. "Read through this because 'cause we're gonna go over this, and there's a lot of information in there, write down any questions you have." But the team was great. Like, they are amazing, so thorough. They really understood that this was so shocking and new to us. Like, there is part of me, and it's going to sound crazy to even vocalize it, but there is part of me that is envious of different organ transplant families because the lungs are the least successful. So they have, you know, I even sometimes get jealous like that, oh, okay, you had a heart transplant. Okay, but your stats aren't as grim as mine, or your child has a better chance. Even some families where their kids are born with a condition or they knew they had a whole life to, I don't want to say prepare, but at least like this is a possibility in our life. So I think it's very difficult because I think Jade and I still harbor some like anger and bitterness. Like, what? Why? Why me? Like, it was never even on our radar that she was sick. And then it just comes out of nowhere. And it's so awful, And getting through the hospital stay was hard because I have a 2.5-year-old and my husband still had to work to keep our insurance. So they stayed in Fort Worth. And Jade and I are in the hospital in Houston. We
Which
don't know
is
anyone.
3 to 4 hours
4
away.
hour, yeah,
4
4 hours
hours.
away, not around our support system. She could not even leave her room because we were in ICU. So it was, we were confined. So a lot of times I even felt guilty walking down to get a coffee. She can't leave the room. I wanted to like do it in solidarity with her because I felt bad.
Yeah.
I just I just wanted to be in it with her. So there would be times where like my parents would come down, they would go and stay with her. I'd go grab dinner with my 2.5-year-old and husband. Um, Once in a great while, I would like not spend the night at the hospital. Someone else would spend the night with her, but I would never leave her alone. Like I just would never do that. But I felt guilty taking breaks when she
Mm.
couldn't.
I think two of the things you've just expressed are incredibly courageous in my mind and very honest. And that is this kind of, like you said, like this grief and this anger and this bitterness around other people's experience who may have a better chance, right? And like, why did they get
Yeah.
that hand and we got this one?
Yeah.
And the second one is this feeling of guilt for leaving the room for any amount of time.
Mm.
And I'm sure like you felt that when you did leave, there was like a sense of refreshment. It's like that shower, that life-changing shower that you take that you
Mm.
can like go in one person and come out another. And that, but it doesn't make it any easier to leave or take those moments for yourself.
Well, and even every time I left, that would be the only time I would cry. I would never cry in front of Jade about it because even before this, she was kind of an anxious kid. She feeds off me. So
Mm.
I'm not showing fear. I'm not showing worry or so that would be like really, I would keep it bottled up and I leave for a couple hours. And now this is the only time I'm getting with like Jordan and my husband and I'm crying the whole time. It was just, it
Right.
was difficult.
Yeah. Those other families that you got acquainted with, what were those relationships like? Were they helpful? I'm sure there's also some sense of like, competition is probably the wrong word, but like we're all in this, we all need lung transplants. We're all, going through this camaraderie, but also, a little bit of jealousy for experiences.
Jade has kind of had, since her transplant, she has caught COVID, got norovirus, broke her elbow. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh my God,
no.
I know, just normal kid thing. She was playing in the front yard. Um, so there are times where I'm like, they're not having hiccups. Like, does this? And
Yes.
then, I start going into, all right, well, does this affect the longevity of how her lungs are going to do compared to their lungs? It is great to have some other moms that you can talk to that get what you're going through. But even then, I don't want to reach out to her just when I'm going through it because she's going through it too, like,
Yeah.
so, unloading these fears. All right, well, if she didn't have those fears, maybe now she'll have them if I'm vocal. It's just
Yeah.
really tricky. It is like a little community, like a little family. And, you're always cheering these other kids on.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good perspective to consider because with families, it's not all hunky dory all the time. You're not always like, sharing your innermost thoughts, but your innermost thoughts with this other person. I find that really honest because
Mhm.
sometimes we can have this idea, I'm going to reach out to this other parent and they're going to get it. But sometimes those relationships are tricky.
Yeah, they are. And it's like you feel, I deal with a lot of guilt. You'll pick up on that as
Yeah.
we talk more, but I don't I feel bad just going to another mom who I know if she feels anything like I feel, she's already stressed. I'm not trying to like,
Mm.
burden her with some of these things because I already know she probably is at her limit too.
Yeah.
So it is there is a sense of you understand what I'm going through and it is like a community, but on the same hand, I know I'm dealing with so much. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's overwhelming.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to repeat. Like I feel this way in therapy and even talking about like what I do at work all day with my husband, somebody I trust so much. I'm like, I don't want to relive what I just went through. I don't want to talk
Mm,
about it again. It's exhausting. It's emotional
it
to have
is.
to think
Oh my,
about all of it.
mhm.
So it's just, you have to balance the cost of talking about it and what that will emotionally tell you. And if the response isn't what you wanted, it's a whole bag.
It is. Even now when we go to certain doctor's appointments, if it's like a new doctor and they're saying, all right, tell me what got you here. Jade will be like, Mom, I'll talk. I don't want you to cry again. I know, I feel so bad, but it is. It's just so sad and emotional and it's a lot.
Ooh, what I hear is like a preteen who like knows what's going on and like has
Yeah.
started to learn and advocate. And I was talking with her name is Dr. Ina Talib, and she's teen health doc on Instagram. I love her. She was on our podcast. And I was asking her about these, kiddos who are preteen and adolescent with chronic complex conditions and how they transition into adult care. And she was like, they're the best at it. She's like, they have been talking about it and hearing about it. And, it was really great to hear her say that she finds that they really learn how to take care of themselves. I want
Mhm.
to step back a little bit. So it's the end of July almost. She says yes to the transplant, and then you go into transplant mode. And
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about that experience and moving forward.
Yeah, it's even though we were inpatient, so it's a little different because some kids are allowed to wait at home. They just have to be, within a certain time frame of the hospital, but we were inpatient. But phone on at all times, answer any phone call that comes through because it could be the one. And actually, we had gotten I don't want to say it was a dry run, but I had gotten a phone call after her being listed for like 5 days. We had gotten a phone call. It did not end up working out. I think she was like second or third on the list. So they were not for her. Yeah, it's it was kind of anxious. I felt like I couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. We had been living in the hospital. I just wanted her to make it, to get the transplant, for her to be healthy enough to receive the transplant. So that was very nerve wracking. Every day that goes by, it's just like, when is it our turn?
Mm. What were some of the things that helped her and you while you guys were in the hospital?
I will say for me, I was given a gratitude journal from the palliative care team. I felt like that helped me. I had to come up with 3 things. So I would do it at nighttime and just write 3 things I was grateful for. And honestly, some days I had to pick the most random thing because there was nothing, I had nothing. It was not a good day, or, I'm thankful I got a warm coffee this morning. Like some days that was it, you
Yeah.
know, um, that I felt helped me. I kept a journal, but that I didn't start writing in it until after her transplant, and I would just write her a letter every day. I think one thing that really got us through the hospital stay, our child life specialists, Bailey and Adair, I'm so grateful for them. I say that Bailey like single-handedly got, and Bailey's a dog, by the way, a canine therapy. But I say that they like single-handedly got her through that hospital stay. There would be days she did not want any doctors to come in. Bailey was her one exception. So she would come once a week. But yeah, they're amazing. I never even thought of all these therapies. Like I was never in a hospital with her. I had no idea, but I'm so grateful and so thankful. We kept trying to make plans for when we got out of the hospital. Let's write a list. Like, what do you want to do? What are things? Let's give you motivation to want to get out of here. And so one of the things she wanted was her own Bailey, her own golden retriever. So I have done my best. I've kept my word. She's got her own golden retriever
Oh.
now. Yeah, she got her for Christmas. Uh, but I keep my word on those things because I felt like that was so important for her while we were there, to not give up. And so these things that we have planned, we're starting to do them and start living again.
You talked about her hesitancy with which is completely honorable and understandable that she didn't want to have to get a lung transplant. What 11-year-old would?
Right.
Um, Now that she has had the lung transplant, she's on the other side. She's getting her golden retriever. Life is not back to normal because there is no going back.
Mm.
Does she see why it was important and how bad she felt before? Or is it's hard in a kind of young adolescent mind?
She does. She'll even make comments to me sometimes. We went to the water park the other day, for example. The last time we were there was about a week before her diagnosis. And my father had her on like one of these little like rope course things in the water, and she didn't even get halfway through it and she started screaming like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, like full panic mode. We just went like 2 weeks ago, and she looked at me and said, do you remember last time we were here? I couldn't even do this. I couldn't walk up the stairs to go on a slide. I couldn't do any of these things. I can breathe now. I can, so now it's just a matter of like PT, her
Yeah.
legs feeling a little weak or something, but she'll say, I can breathe. Yeah, she's noticed a difference.
Mm. how does she handle the follow-up visits, all that comes with, like you talked about the team making sure that her compliance and your compliance too, right? You're the one
Mhm.
driving the ship, making sure meds get taken and that you get
Mhm.
them and she gets to appointments. It's a for sure a team. How have you both been doing with that?
We we like going back down to Houston. She gets to see her people. We stop in and we see Bailey and Adair. So she doesn't mind that part. We do have local doctors that we see, like, in the interim. She's not crazy about going to those appointments, but I mean, she doesn't give me any pushback. She knows this is what we need to do, and this is kind of how life is right now. And as we get further out, those things will lessen. But um, yeah, she looks forward to going back down to Houston because we'll also go to like Galveston for a day, go to the beach. She loves the beach, so we just try to, yeah, this is what we need to do, and
Yeah.
we just do it. This is life now. Yeah.
As we kind of get to the end of this episode, and I know it's not the end of your story, but tell me about what you've learned about yourself since this onset, this diagnosis, that this complete turning point of your life. Like, what have you learned about yourself?
I don't even, it's crazy because I still don't feel like anything is about me. A lot of people will say, "You've been through it too," but I would trade positions with her in a heartbeat. I have no control over this. It just makes me think, and I've verbalized it before to, like, friends, but I thought I was stressed before diagnosis, like, in this day-to-day, like, those things don't matter. Once this happened, the only thing that mattered was keeping her alive, doing what we needed to do for her health. People always say, "You're so strong." I wish I was weak. I wish I didn't have to be strong. I had no choice. None of us had a choice. I used to think that I was the strong one. I think now she's way stronger than me. I just don't, yeah, it makes just everything else seem so mindless. And it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, things
As
we used
that
to care about. I just don't.
It's like that shift in perspective of what really matters. Do
Yeah.
you find that popping up in your everyday life still? Like, I
Yeah.
can imagine sitting at the traffic light and, just it just
Mhm.
constantly follows you.
It does. We're still not even at that year mark post transplant. So I do feel like it's very emotional still. And I feel like I didn't even process most of it until afterwards.
Yeah.
Even just the other day, I had a breakdown about her transplant and what they were actually doing during that surgery. And
Of
it's,
course.
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Are there any other stories or parts of your experience that you were hoping to share that I didn't ask you about?
One thing is, I think Jade is so hilarious. You don't have to use this if you don't want to.
I want to hear all
She
about her. I've been like chomping at the bit.
she's so funny. Like, she's so witty. She has the best sense of humor. And she was intubated for about a week after surgery because she is pretty anxious. They needed to make sure that she was really relaxing and staying calm. But when she woke up, she was still pretty loopy. And I had asked her, like, she said, "I had my transplant." And I said, "Yeah, you had it. Like, it's all, it's over." And I said, "You want to know about your donor?" Because I only had like one fact about her. And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, your lungs are from a girl, and she was 26." And without even skipping a beat, she said, "So does this mean I can have a margarita?" And I'm like, "What in the world?" And so she has since named her lungs Margot and Rita. But
Oh my God.
yes,
That
she
is
is so funny.
hilarious. I'm sure
Yeah.
you're like ready for this like beautiful like moment and response. That is
Yeah.
amazing.
I know. We were all like dying laughing. She's just so funny.
So funny. So funny. What shift in Jade have you seen?
I have seen she is a lot more trusting of herself now. I think before diagnosis, I think, very timid, maybe hesitant, and she kind of takes charge and trust, hey, this doesn't feel right, or I don't like this, and she'll speak up for herself. Sometimes I'm like, ugh, not so much, but I really do feel like that kind of stubbornness really helped her through recovery.
I love that. We want these like strong, opinionated little girls in
Mm,
our lives. Not a little girl anymore. She's 12 years old.
mhm.
What My last question for you is why did you want to come on and share about what you guys have been through?
First of all, PVOD is so rare. I just think maybe having more awareness of the disease. Even after her transplant, she had said to me, well, maybe now the doctors can study my lungs so other kids won't get this, to help other kids. She makes me cry so much with some of the stuff
Wow.
she says. Yeah.
She's so wise.
But also because I feel like this is partly healing for me too, being able to tell our story, what we've been through. I know, like, on my Instagram, I'll make, like, little videos, a lot of just some of the hospital stuff that we've been through. Maybe another mom is feeling the same way and just needs, some inspiration or so she doesn't feel alone. I I've told our coordinator that, because they put me in contact with a mom while we were in the hospital, and I would love, like, she's asked me before and I have agreed to it because it is very isolating, and no matter how close your girlfriends are or your family, they don't get it.
Mm.
They're not the ones going through it, so I just feel like it's really helpful to have someone who can remotely get what you're going through and understand.
Well, there's no doubt that you will and have done that and will continue to do that. And as much as we can share awareness about PVOD and signs and symptoms and treatment, we want to do that. I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful to you for coming on here and being really brave and saying hard things. And I I want you to know that you deserve care as much as Jade does and to be taken care of and loved on and supported. My mom has always said since I was little, and it bothered me when I was little, but I get it now. She was like, she's going to kill me for saying this. She's like, your heart is breaking and mine is breaking twice. It's breaking for you and it's breaking for me.
Yeah,
And at first, when I'm little, I'm like, you don't know my pain, but now I get it. It's like we feel these things so deeply because our love runs so deep. And it's like
yeah,
the most beautiful but painful thing at times. So I just appreciate you being so honest about that. You're through it, but as true transplant and most medical families know, there's no end, right? There's just always
yeah,
what's next. And sometimes it's a little slower and sometimes it's crisis.
yeah, and that is one thing too. I think a lot of people who don't deal with transplants or even these medical conditions, I think they assume, "Oh, she got a transplant. She's fine. It's perfect."
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
usually
getting started. Yeah,
it's just the beginning. Well,
yeah,
thank you for being you. And Jada's so lucky to have you as her mom.
thank you.
And if people want to follow along with you and see some of those videos, do you have a public
Yeah,
social media or how can people find you?
I do. I made my Instagram public when we were inpatient. We posted a lot about canine therapy, and I like to post a lot about, like, canine assistance because that is where Bailey did come from, and I just think they're so important and crucial to have in children's hospitals.
Mm,
Because she not only was really there for Jade, we asked her to carry such heavy loads for us.
mm. Those
And so I
doggies
try to
have
bring
big
even
jobs.
yes, awareness for them too.
Wow. That's another good question is what resources do you recommend besides canine therapy or any PVOD groups that you think parents should join?
So I am in a lung transplant group, a pulmonary hypertension group, because even though she was transplanted, I feel like I could potentially be beneficial on that side of it too, because she technically did have it. But art therapy, music therapy, at Texas Children's, they have video game therapy. How cool is that? So he would come in once a week and they'd play video games for an hour. But I really never had any clue. Even child life, oh my goodness, all of the activities, and even because Jade would feel uncomfortable, talking to me about some of her fears, the child life specialists were amazing. She could talk to them, ask them questions. They brought in a doll with actual like little, plastic tubes coming out of them just so she could see, okay, when I wake up from my transplant, this is what to expect. This is normal. Like, we don't need to freak out because she is pretty anxious. So, and they were wonderful.
Do you think that helped her? Because that's always a question we get if, your child runs anxious. Does seeing it make it scarier or does it help? What do you
So
think?
typically I would say it would make it scarier for her. However, I think she needed to see it. She was at an age where she was aware. Even child life would tell me, she's asking me questions that, like, my older teens ask me. What happens if I wake up during surgery? What happened? So they were really great in being honest with her, but they did know she was anxious. So they went a little,
Yeah.
they eased into it. It took a lot of time for her to have those conversations.
Mhm. Yeah. That's true. It's not always a come in, sit down, here's what's happening. Bye. It's
Yeah.
sometimes building that confidence that you can learn about it.
Yeah.
Well, what is your social media so that everybody can come follow you?
My Instagram, it is Jan Ashley with two E's, 10, Jan Ashley 10.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to tag you, and I'm so grateful to get to meet you. I'll actually be in the Dallas Fort Worth area this weekend for the Child Life Conference. So
Oh,
we'll
wow.
there's going to be so many dogs there. I'm so excited.
Oh my goodness.
But thank you so much for coming on here and being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.